So I wanted to take the opportunity to read to you all a section. This is actually in Appendix D of my book. I wanted to take an opportunity to read this because I recently saw that the state of Maryland has a power problem. And that power problem was brought to witness in the most recent general elections with voter turnout. And back on May 31st, 2025, I wrote a letter to various officials or various people in the state of Maryland and elsewhere that I'll read to you all. But if you're interested in reading the context behind everything, make sure that you go to my website at www.thetishahillman.com and pick up the Chapter 13 plan, Spiritual Recovery, Reclamation, and Reorganization of My Divine Birthright from a Morally Bankrupt System. And again, the website is thetishahillman.com. So I'm going to start on page 217. This is a letter. Let me see here. Right, some things have been redacted, but this is a letter that I wrote to the Office of the Governor, Westmore, Anthony Brown, Maryland Attorney General, Counsel for the IRS, Maryland Insurance Administration, Derek Davis, the Maryland State Treasurer, the Maryland Department of Transportation, and the U.S. Department of Education. And the letter is regarding Social Security number, date of birth, and intent to resolve a material dispute. In the moral and social contract that you refer to as the Constitution, note that, as with all contracts, any ambiguity or uncertainty of meaning or intention shall be construed against the drafter. Although these words will offend some, I trust that those reading this will have the emotional intelligence to work beyond any triggering you may experience, to allow yourself to bear witness to truth in motion. The intent of this writing is not to offend or to create conflict, but rather to resolve a material dispute, bringing clarity and wholeness in a space where there's been so much unnecessary pain and suffering. 161 years ago, and this was obviously as of 2025, in the year 1964, the Maryland Constitution abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, except for as punishment of a quote-unquote crime. In 1865, the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution followed suit. As historically reported, on June 19, 1865, the last people in the United States being held as property through what has become known as chattel slavery were notified that they were now, quote-unquote, free. The people who were referred to as slaves were people who were taken against their will and forced to do things against their will that would create and build wealth for their quote-unquote owners, with no compensation to them and with little to no regard for the person, except as to the extent that they added value to the lives of those who were referred to as the quote-unquote masters, holding power over the quote-unquote slave. When people are viewed as something over which we have the right to lord over, possess, use, and enjoy for our own purposes, this creates a mental paradigm in which one person sees the other as property and not as a person. This allows one to easily turn a blind eye to the suffering of those who we see as the functional equivalent of bank account digits or just numbers on your computer. In its traditional form, slavery is a system where individuals are quote-unquote owned by other people, considered property, and subjected to forced labor and deprivation of rights. Slave-based systems generally have a shared characteristic that involves using the energy or labor of another to enrich someone else, a group or entity, without adequate consideration, both legal and or otherwise, for the one whose energy or labor is being used. These patterns and practices have resulted in the unjust enrichment of entire groups of people for hundreds of years and continued until this day. Involuntary servitude is where a person is forced to work against their will through physical force, threats, or legal intimidation. The defining feature in involuntary servitude is a lack of free will. Knowing the same, all of you have pledged your allegiance to these patterns and practices that have allowed various forms of slavery and involuntary servitude to exist and perpetuate. The purpose of this correspondence is to bring you all together so that I can address the people and or entities who believe and or operate as if they have a vested interest in my success, while simultaneously doing nothing to assist me in acquiring such success, doing nothing to assist me in times of any perceived lack or need, but instead who have taken affirmative actions to penalize, quote unquote, punish, and deprive me, quote unquote, of my divine right to live, exist, and create freely as a divine manifestation of the Creator herself. I began this communication with defining slavery and involuntary servitude so that you understand on a cellular level how the very system that you have pledged your allegiance to was designed and created to allow slavery and involuntary servitude to operate perpetually without most people ever recognizing this truth or otherwise believing they are in fact free. The drafters of your governing documents wrapped up the language of slavery and his children in words and spells called taxes, fines, penalties, charges, surcharges, late fees, interest, mortgages, debt, and death rituals, and told the people it was now legal and lawful to extract energy from people using these sources, and in some cases they would be punished if they did not obey, regardless of the cost to the people or person. As we know, your governing documents once made it legal and lawful to own other people, while the lawmakers, judges, quote unquote officials, and law enforcement turned a blind eye to people being beaten, killed, wrongfully accused, and having all manner of atrocities committed against them. All of this was allowed to continue because having other people do the work while so-called overseers collected the energy or currency from the people's work to build their own empires and wealth for themselves, their friends, their business partners, and their families was at the forefront. Humanity and decency took a back seat when money and politics took the wheel. And that became the governing quote unquote law that is now headed off a cliff. I say these things to say that like non-genetically modified seed growing in a garden, my growth, expansion, and fruitfulness requires what it requires. For my own growth, expansion, and fruitfulness, I can no longer allow you to deprive me of what I require. This elaborate system of debt slavery, carefully and strategically woven, crafted, maintained, and sustained by way of language arts, spellcasting, and use of fear of punishment, penalty, and sanctions is not sustainable. My story is an example of what happens when there is no more money left to take from someone and no more energy left to extract to sustain your narrative. Pardon me. Free with the book, y'all. You come face to face with truth. If this were a colony of bees, this is what is called colony collapse. In a world that doesn't see the value in bees, but finds value in poisoning the very soil where your food grows, that reference may not be appreciated by all. Nevertheless, colony collapse which interestingly enough can be caused by pesticides, happens when there is a loss of worker bees. This leads to the death of the queen and the hive. The debt-based system that operates your paradigm, values, money, and perceived power. But the power is not real if you have to oppress, suppress, and depress others to obtain it, sustain it, or wield it. It is merely an elaborate illusion that has been cast over the masses using spell work by way of the word, and then using fear to uphold or to hold on to the perception of power for the purpose of keeping the money flowing. The flow has dried up for the debt-based paradigm. You may not know this fully yet, but you see it when you look out at the people. Many are struggling. Some are broke and broken. Many are angry, depressed, sick, tired, and sick and tired of being sick and tired, and no longer trust you to act in their best interest. People want to know why they worked so hard, only to still find themselves struggling just to survive, but are being made to feel like something is wrong with them because they don't want to keep giving energy to a system that is robbing them and their posterity of any wealth they try to acquire, as they are trying to secure the blessings and liberties to themselves and their posterity. This is beyond politics, race, religion, and all the other boxes used to trap the light of truth into prisms of perception. This is truth in motion. The color of law is being used and has historically been used to justify amoral behavior and actions. Lest we forget, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Ephesians 6:12. Your system of law is but a system of rules and regulations that orders human activities and relations through systematic application of the force of a politically organized society or through social pressure backed by force. Using this operating system or that operating system, the entities herein or therein did take affirmative actions to perpetuate slavery and involuntary servitude in violation of the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution and the Maryland Constitution. Specifically, and using patterns and practices common to them, the entities herein attempted to make and keep Tisha S. Hillman, a person born free, captive in cycles of debt slavery with no viable means of escape. So, it's lengthy. It's actually, 279? The total 275 pages, y'all. So that is the chapter 13 plan. This is available on my website, again, at thetishahillman.com. So again, the context of that letter is written and contained in these chapters. So if you feel so aligned or want to know more about my story and what I was experiencing at that time and what made me decide to put pen to paper, as they say, go to my website and listen. If you, wherever you are, if you would like to see the chapter 13 plan in a bookstore near you, make sure that you drop that in the comments. Let me know where you are. Let me know what bookstore, and we'll get in touch with the people and see if we can work that out. But listen, I hope that you all have enjoyed my reading of part of my story. But in any event, I'm grateful to be on the other side of things, or to be in another, you know what I mean? To be in another space at this point. But listen, a lot was happening then. And so some of you, if you followed me on social media, you know